right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's Hive webinar. The topic of today's discussion is remote work in Africa and the digital media space with Mukuka. So basically, we're hoping to get out of this. A lot of people are working from home for the first time, or some people have been doing it for a while, but they are still struggling with understanding how to set a schedule with working from home. There's a lot more tasks that you have to do now that you're balancing home life and work life. So with Mukuka's experience, we believe she'll be able to share a lot more from things that a lot of us don't know, what platforms to use if you're communicating with your workmates, and so on and so forth. If you do have any questions, you're free to add them to the chat on your right-hand side, on the right-hand side of the screen while Mukuka is presenting. And then in the last 15 minutes of the session, we'll do a Q&A session where she can answer your specific questions that you have. All right, over to you.
Okay, so before I start my presentation, I should introduce myself and explain a little bit of my background. And if you hear any noise, like I said, that's my little terrorist, aka my landlord, my 2-year-old son, and my husband is working from home as well. So I started off working within the legal field and then transitioned into digital media simply because I fell ill and wasn't able to go to work, and I kind of fell into blogging. And then from blogging, I discovered quite a lot of content online, Zambian content online. But then I also found Facebook pages that weren't really, or even websites that were out of date. And I thought, okay, the social media presence. From there, I was in Australia at the time, and I tried to pitch to a few people, but obviously conversations came back to, okay, when you're here, you're in the country, then people that chose actually work for free. From where I was, I wanted to find out whether it would work, and that's the relationship, and then eventually I moved to Zambia. Even working in Zambia, I still discovered that people wanted to have quote unquote small meetings. And it's never a small meeting, is it? It's always a 30-minute meeting that now extends to 30, 40 minutes. So that's basically how I started in the digital media field, and why I started in the digital media field. So recently, obviously with COVID-19, it's really sad that we're here now because we've had to work remotely. But I do urge everybody that this is now the time where, especially working in Africa or in Zambia specifically, it's always been very difficult from my end and from my friends within the field to convince people to accept that they can be at home and actually work and get their deliverables in. So my experience and my knowledge base in the last year or 2 years has really been about how to work better, how to deliver what you promise, and how to even get the client or even your employer on board with you working remotely. So now I'll go into the presentation, and as Maretta said, if you have any questions for me, please put them in the chat box and I will answer them towards the end. Okay, so I hope everybody can see. Maretta, please tell me if I go too fast or you can't see my screen. Yes, everybody can see. Ooh. Just hold on, sorry guys. Okay. Let me present. Okay. Can everybody see my screen yet?
It's loading now. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So let us begin. Okay, so remote work in Africa. By the way, my nickname, or I guess the name that found me, is Mama Fixer or Miss Fixer, because I like to fix things. I like to fix media, social media profiles. I like to fix people's lives. It's my passion project. If I had $1 billion sitting somewhere, I'll probably be doing this work for free. But I don't have $1 billion, so yeah, I have to charge people. So that's why we're here. So number one, with the remote work situation, you have to set your boundaries off the bat. It's really important whether you are a freelancer or whether you are an employee, you have to make sure that there are boundaries set. Working from home has different dynamics. For example, for myself, I've always been working from home, but the difference was that I had a nanny and I had my son going to school for half the day, and my husband was working from his office in another like an hour away. But now the dynamics of our working lives and our living lives have changed. My husband is now at home. My child is now at home, and we no longer have childcare assistance. So that means that we've had to really change the way we work and the way we live and everything. And I had to sit down with my husband and say that, okay, how is this going to impact how I work, and how is it going to impact how you work? But not only that, I also had to communicate with my clients to say that, look, things are going to be a little bit different because I'm not going to be as available to you, and there may be a little bit of delays based on the fact that our work lives have been disrupted a little bit by COVID-19 and the way that I now work home. So I think that from my experience anyway, my clients were very understanding and accepting. And I think that I always say to you that if you have the conversation with people and explain to them what it is that's happening in your life and you set those boundaries early on, it's much, much easier than trying to set boundaries later down the track, okay? Because working from home does not mean you're available 24/7. It just doesn't mean that. So you have to make sure that people understand what time you start work and what time you end work. And obviously, after you've worked a couple of days, I'm sure everybody has experienced this in the last, if you started working recently or you've been working for a while now, things do change. So you may have to reset your boundaries. And again, it just goes back to having that conversation with clients or your employer to say that, listen, I'm going to have to change a few things. Like, for example, I don't work weekends anymore. Whereas before, I would be happy to work on a Saturday, and that would be the best time for me to actually catch up with a lot of things. But now, because Monday to Friday, I'm mostly either working or looking after our child, it means that weekends are is my time to actually spend with my two people, and I have to enforce that now. Okay, unless there is a huge emergency, then weekends are off. So, and that's something that I've communicated to all my clients. Okay, and then it also goes down to enforcing boundaries should be across the board. It doesn't have to be just on particular things, but just make sure that wherever you feel that you need to enforce your boundaries, enforce them. So it could even be about meetings and for how long. If you have a client that you know speaks for 2 hours, but really it's just necessary for a 30-minute meeting, then you have to be like, listen, 30 minutes and that's it. You go past 30 minutes and then we have to move beyond that, okay? If a client or even like a teammate misses a meeting time slot, then the next time you schedule it for another time. I think that's important because during this time as well, you have very limited time to have conversations with people and actually do the work. So you cannot afford for people to be late. You cannot afford for people to forget meeting times. If they do miss their meeting time slot, you have to again set that boundary and say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to meet you in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes because I'm doing something else, okay? Now, into setting boundaries, there are ways. I know some people feel very awkward in having these conversations. So sometimes when you're setting, there are other ways in which you can set boundaries without having the conversation. So for example, you can download WhatsApp for Business. You don't have to have 2 phones, you can have 2 SIM cards. And I really enjoy WhatsApp for Business for myself because it allows me to move all my business contacts to my WhatsApp for Business line, and you can actually schedule the time or set an away message for the time that you're not available. And if all else fails, you can just delete the app delete the app when you're done at the end of the day and reload it again. And people get used to that schedule. I mean, they just get used to the fact that, look, these are her boundaries and she doesn't have anything else that she can do beyond that, and it's fine. But obviously, it's better to have the conversation with people rather than, just letting people assume. Okay, so that's the first important thing. So now let's focus on the remote aspect of it. You all have to remember that you don't have the same remote working experience. So I know that sounds funny, but even where I'm presenting, I'm coming from the fact that I have a child, I have a husband who is assisting me with childcare. We work together, that's my partner. You may be a single mom or a single dad, and it may be a completely different experience. So a lot of the stuff that I would talk about today is based on my experience and my knowledge. And I would encourage you to take what is relevant and what will work for you and apply it to your own lives. It's not a copy and paste type of advice that I'm giving you. I would prefer that you listen to everything that I'm saying and then apply what works. Okay. So one of the other reasons why I really wanted to do this webinar was the fact that everybody else from the remote articles that I was reading, some of the videos that I came across, they didn't really relate to the experience that I had working in Zambia, and I'm based in South Africa now, and I've worked remotely in other countries in Africa. So it seemed so far removed from my experience, the reality of working remotely. A lot of people are talking about converting their 2-bedroom apartment into a cozy workspace. I know a lot of people don't have that luxury. And because for us, we're wondering if load shedding will happen during crucial meetings. Even today, I had to double check with our local service provider to say that, listen, I hope there's no load shedding today because I have this particular thing. And those are the things that you have to kind of check. And then also have to remember that your remote working experience is an experience in itself, and everything is a learning curve. So even if you drop the ball with clients or even drop the ball with your employer, it's okay. You can mess up. The point of remote work, I think, is that the experience itself teaches you a lot, and you adapt, you learn, you adapt, and you get better at it. And you get better to the point where you notice the curveballs before they happen, and then you apply whatever lessons you can to your remote work process, and you get better at it. So that's important. And then on top of that, you have to know what your weaknesses are, because then you will struggle to work remotely better and also deliver for your clients and for your employer. So for some people, it may be that they're procrastinators. For others, it could be that they don't work well in the morning where everybody else does. For some people, it may be that even after they have a meeting, they're not so great with writing the minutes or remembering what happened from the last meeting. So you have to really look at what your weaknesses are and work on blocking those weaknesses as soon as possible. So you have to know them, you have to understand them, you have to accept them, and then work around them. That's really, really important. So that's the admin side of things. So when it comes to remote work, you want to have a really well-oiled machine, because from a communications perspective, that's what remote work is really about. It's so dependent on how you communicate, how often you communicate, what you're saying when you're communicating, because right now you can't just say, hey, Lee, you can tap your coworker on the shoulder and say, can I talk to you for 2 seconds? Or you can't say to your partners or clients that, listen, can we have a meeting? Can we meet up tomorrow or today? Those things currently are not available to us. So now you have to think about how you communicate and the best way that you communicate. And obviously now you have to keep in mind there's people's availabilities, the schedules, whether you've got Wi-Fi strength, the time zones, and everything else that you have to consider. And so prior to you even taking on work, if you're a freelancer, those are the things you should consider before you take on a client. Because those are the things that you can actually negotiate with the client and explain that, okay, I'm going to have challenges in this, so maybe let's work differently to mitigate any challenges that you may have or that they may have. So that's important when you start any sort of remote work. Make sure you communicate any difficulties, any challenges, and just look at what can affect your remote work. Okay. So what I like to do is before I start work for any client, and I would say this for if you are an employee, you work for a brand or you work for a corporate, you start off with assumptions. What are the assumptions you had prior to working remotely or even before you work remotely for a particular client? So I always do like an assumptions checklist. And sometimes it has 7 things on there or 8 things. Sometimes it has three assumptions on there. And basically you write it all down or you type it out and you look at what assumptions you may have prior to starting any sort of work or project or even working with a client. So sometimes your assumption can be everyone can use remote working tool, they understand them, what they are or comfortable in them. So let's say you come up with a client and the client says to you, yeah, I know Skype, I know Trello, I know Asana, I know Slack, I know all those things. And you assume that they also know those things. And then you come across a client who says, no, I just do WhatsApp. And when you look at what they need, you realize that they do need to have maybe Skype sessions or you need to talk to them. There's got to be, you have to now create a solution around that assumption. You may have another assumption that everybody has reliable internet. That's not always the case. Or everybody has electricity. That's also not always the case. So I always start off with looking at what assumptions I have, writing them all down, and then when I have a meeting with a client or even have, if you're an employee, when you write down all the assumptions you may have before starting the project, and then in your meeting, obviously online, you then kind of address each assumption to say that, okay, I'm assuming everybody is cool with remote working tools. I'm assuming everybody has reliable internet. Is that correct? Is that correct? Rather than starting work and then having assumed all these things, and then later down the track, you're now finding that actually people don't have reliable internet. People are being load shedded 5 days out of the 7. So those are the sorts of things that you need to address in any meeting prior to starting work. Okay, so when we talk about the reality, as you can see on the screen, the major issue for us that works on the continent is that our internet service providers aren't always the best. So you have Airtel, you have MTN Zambia, you have Official Zamtel, you have Hi, and really a lot of the times we don't realize how this affects. Well, some clients don't. Some clients don't realize how much this affects us. The fact that we can't even log on or download a picture. I saw on Twitter yesterday somebody saying that it's taken me a whole 2 hours just to open up my Instagram account. And you can imagine if you are a social media manager, that must be the most frustrating thing. And that's the reality of working on the continent. Okay, and it's not just in Zambia. Like I said, in South Africa, you have to understand that right now, even small and medium businesses, normally sometimes they would have backup generators, but even then, in the last year or so, we've been having load shedding, and you can work from home and then decide to go to a coffee shop and then find out that there's no power there. So then, what do you do in that case? And that's where you have to, with remote work, there's that aspect of you have to mitigate these situations. You have to actually come across these challenges and say, okay, this stuff will most likely happen, and you have to prepare for them before they happen. And I think that's where the difference is for us, as opposed to other people who work in other places, is that we always have to think 10 or 7 steps ahead about what is likely to happen, and then make sure that we address those things or mitigate those issues before they happen. It's almost like that's the fixer part of my life that comes in. Okay, so, and what I mean by mitigate that, it's really a lot of your work, I think, when you work remotely, especially within the digital media space, you're doing a lot of remote crisis management, which is what's happening right now. We're doing a lot of social media crisis management in the sense that brands are having to think twice or 3 times or 4 times before they communicate online. They're having to retract certain statements, and you're having to work quickly. And I think that's the greatest part of remote work, is that, well, the fun part for me anyway, is that I like, yes, there's load shedding, yes, there's data issues, but how are we going to handle it? What is it that the client needs, and how do I handle it without it becoming an issue? If they don't know how to use Skype or they don't use Slack, what is the solution? Because that's why people should hire you, is that you come up with a solution. Okay, and I think that when you're addressing a lot of things prior to working with somebody, it's important that you have these conversations. Like I said, you address the assumptions first of all, and then you consult with the team or your client and figure out, first of all, what is the best platform everybody can use. And if there are people who don't use those platforms, then train them. That's my advice to you. Train everybody so that everybody's on the same level. If it's a client who doesn't use the same platforms that you use, but you feel that they need it, that is also an opportunity for you to offer them a service and say, look, I will train you, or I will train somebody under you, an intern or another employee, who will be able to use this particular tool, and then we can communicate. I had one client who, prior to this, we used to use Skype quite a bit, but then because we were working remotely, and Skype it's not my favorite platform, I introduced them to Zoom. So I did a session with a tool that the client currently uses right now. They had to close their doors. And then next week, I'm now doing a Zoom training session for the entire team. So if you think about it, if you look at all the assumptions that you may have, that, okay, everybody knows what Zoom is. That's not the case, but there's also an opportunity for you to teach. And if that's not your thing, that's also okay. You can also, if you don't use Zoom, then I can't help you. That's also a choice that you can have. Solution number 2. So with the second assumption that we had earlier, which is, everybody has access. So whenever you know that you have load shedding issues or data connectivity issues, you have to preempt this by either emailing or messaging your clients, or even your work, your teammates, to say that, listen, this thing, I'm not able to participate because of this and that. But in other ways as well, what you can do is, if you're going through a load shedding, you can actually set up in your email signature, something that just says that, oh, we're currently experiencing load shedding, so I may be unable to respond to your emails in time. And if that's the case, and if it's urgent, please call me. If you work if you have an employer, then you can even say, okay, you can possibly call this other person or contact this other person if I have not responded in time. So those sorts of things, I think clients really do appreciate it, because it's almost you preempt issues that they would otherwise be very irritated if you just said, oh, but I had load shedding. And it's almost like, yes, okay, we all do have load shedding, and we may have data connectivity issues, but if you set up a like I said, if you preempt this either by emailing or messaging, or even creating something where it's a message that goes out to people that says, listen, thank you for your email. I'm currently unable to respond because of load shedding, and I will get back to you in good time, or please contact XYZ while I'm away. I think that's also important. Another solution that you can have in regards to some of the challenges you may have, get into the habit of completing online-only tasks when you have electricity. That's something that took me some time to get into, but it's really saved me a lot of time. There are also a lot of stuff that you can do, especially within the digital media space, that you can do offline. And that's where it now comes back to the discussion about not everybody can use Slack or Trello. And if you're heavily reliant on those, you have to then preempt it and say, what happens if half of our team can't get online because of load shedding or data connectivity issues? There's got to be a backup or a crisis plan, so that you preempt any excuses like, oh, I couldn't get on because of XYZ. Unfortunately, that's how we have to manage where we are. Okay. So setting your workflow. So it's really important, number one, when you start working off remotely, that you understand and you look at how you work and the best way that you work. For me, it's first thing in the morning, I check emails and messages, and I respond to my big items first and my small items last. My big items first only because, and remember, as I said, it's my experience, only because we have a small child. So prior to my little terrorist waking up, I make sure that I check all my emails and messages, and I respond to all the big items first. And the big items are normally things that I would have to sit down and type out on my laptop. And then my small items, I always answer them last. And those are things that I can either respond via email using my phone, and I don't have to get on a laptop. And then the second thing that I do is I schedule approved content. I follow up pending artwork, any other items or notes, and invoices, of course. Okay, and then I take a break and eat, feed the baby, put away laundry. That is basically the first 3 or 4 hours of my morning. And the rest of the day is also planned, but I'm not going to bore you with my workflow. But it's kind of similar to what I would advise you to do. Look at what your home life is like and what needs to be done, and what schedule you have in place for the work that you have coming up. And of course, again, if you've communicated with either your clients or your employer about what is necessary to be done during the week, then it's much, much easier. You can say to your employer or even your client, okay, what are the big things that we need to do this week? What are the things that need to be done that I need to do? And then you create a timeline or a schedule. And it's really helpful because it helps you complete tasks faster when you have a schedule of your time and lay out everything. And when I say everything, you can even put in toilet breaks in there. If it helps. And again, for me, like I've read remote articles where it says that don't do laundry, don't cook. You have to look at it like a work day. And in my head, I'm thinking, if I don't cook, my 2-year-old is going to have a fit. So that just doesn't work for me. That advice doesn't work for me. So again, like I said, create a workflow for you, or a simple timeline or schedule that says, okay, Mondays, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what Mondays look like. When you do that and you get into the habit of doing that, you become really consistent in the way you do things, and you are able to complete tasks easier and faster. And also, if you live with other people, you can actually create that schedule and put it up somewhere, either on the fridge or a communal area where they will know that, okay, at 8 a.m., this person is on a Skype call or has meetings at 8 a.m. So there's no need for me to be blasting Chef 187 at 8 a.m. It's just not fair. So it's great to also create a schedule and then share it with everybody else who lives in your home. That's also important. My husband has done the same thing, and it's the first time that I realized that my husband is actually a really busy guy. Hey, even though he answers my calls during the day, it's the first time I'm like, wow, you're actually really busy. But it's nice because now we match up our schedules, and so it works really well for us. Okay, so the other thing about remote work, especially on the content, is you always have to restructure and adapt. Nothing is ever the same. I think we've all learned that by now. This week you may have great internet, you may have no load shedding, and you're like, oh wow, it's great. But things will change, and you have to adapt as quickly as they change. So for people who are employed by the brands, corporates, it may be that you have a Tuesday or Wednesday staff meeting, and that Tuesday or Wednesday staff meeting may be interfering with everything else that is happening at home. You have to, again, communicate if it's clashing with other meetings or it's clashing with anything else that's happening in your life. I don't believe in the grin and bear it and find a way around it policy, because then you're not a happy person and you're not focused in the meeting. If there's another way where your presence can be registered, or your thoughts or your feedback about what the meeting is about can be registered prior to the meeting, great, then let's do that. But don't feel, if you feel, especially for me, whenever I've worked with clients, if the way we're working is not working for me anymore, even though we've signed a contract, I always feel that you can have a conversation with a client and say, listen, can we restructure? what we agreed on prior. There are things that have changed, or I feel that this would work better for us. And for me, 9 times out of 10, it works. People are accepting and they say, okay, I understand. Let's try and work something out. And so the quicker you adapt, like I said, working on the continent is really about looking ahead as far as possible, yes. But if things catch you caught unawares, then you have to adapt as quickly as possible. You can't bury your head in the sand and expect it to get better anytime soon. You just have to restructure whatever you can and then adapt as quickly as possible. Okay, so now let's get to the fact that a lot of you now are probably working remotely. This is the time, and I think for the Zambian context especially, to make this stick. Remote work is not something that we accept in Zambia specifically. I mean, in other countries, yes, but even then, there's still this concept of I have to see your face in the office. And you also have to understand, you know, people get to a certain level in life and they create offices, and it's a milestone for them. So for them to say that, oh, come and see me at my office, and this is these are my people, they work here, it's something that it's very hard for them to let go of, to say that no, you can work from home. So you have to make the stick, and you have to show your clients or your company why you should be working remotely even after COVID-19. So one of the things that I think is really important is you have to make sure that you track yourself before anybody tracks you, okay? So don't have that thing where a client now calls you and says, I have not heard from you for 7 days. What is happening? Why have I not heard you? If you have to, you can either send them weekly updates and you communicate that prior to starting work and say, listen, I'm going to send you a weekly update or a monthly update or a monthly report, and then we can have a weekly meeting, and I will tell you what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, where I'm struggling. That is so important, because then it fosters trust. Okay, it fosters trust, because then somebody says that before I tell you what's wrong, you will probably tell me what's wrong. And that means that I don't have to always look over your shoulder to see if there's work being done or if there's challenges with work. And also, as much as you're doing the work, if you drop the ball, it's just as important for you to show that you can quickly make up for it and handle any conflicting issues or schedules. Again, it goes back to that thing that I was saying about you being the fixer. You're the person who needs to come in and say, don't worry, I dropped the ball, but it's handled. I'm going to fix it. You're going to have to provide, a lot of remote work is providing people with the confidence that if I don't see you in the office, I still am confident that wherever you are, whatever you're doing it, and it's going to get done. I don't have to worry about it. And then the second thing is you have to look at your work process and workflow. If you feel that there are things that can be streamlined, things that can be done easier, then do that. And you always have to do your research. One of the things with remote work within the digital media space that I find interesting is that every other week or every other month, we have updates and things that make it easier for us to do our work. So for example, on Twitter, if you don't have Hootsuite, which is which you can schedule multiple schedules across multiple platforms. Some people like to go onto Twitter and use the Twitter for web, right? So right now, I think Twitter actually rolled out on some platforms or some accounts, you can actually schedule tweets now in advance. So it's things like that that you have to be aware of that come out, and you have to make sure that you are aware of those updates and those type of new things that are coming out. And you always have to do your research so that you are up to date and you're ahead of the curve, so that you're not behind, because that really helps you improve your work and also makes it just easier for you and your clients or your team. Last but not least, I will always say show up and show out. So what that basically means is that if you can go above and beyond, even during this time, especially, even when it's not required or requested of you, this is the time to do it. Because when this is all over, and hopefully it will be all over soon, you want to actually show people that you don't even need to have me in the office. You don't even need to have meetings with me at all, actually. Like, I'm a star when I'm at home. So and again, you have to do all these other things so that people can actually trust you and let you set your own hours and do your own things. I'm really, really, really lucky to be in a position where I can set my own hours, and my clients trust me enough to know that she'll get it done and she'll do it when she can. I don't have that many clients stressing me or calling me every other day or whatever. I just don't. But that took time. It wasn't easy. We had to get into a rhythm. I had to show them that I could do the work. I had to track myself. I had to streamline work process and workflow and say, okay, maybe we can do this and make it easier. So that's also really, really important. Okay, so I think that is the gist of what I wanted to share. I think, yeah, if anybody has any questions, Marita, we can look at the questions now, I guess.
Yes, questions now. We've had quite a few. Thank you so much to everyone who's been engaging in the chat session. So the first one came in from Putumile Lee, and he was asking about how to schedule work time, especially if you're working from home and it's a small space. And I think the second part of her question was scheduling meetings with her business partners on the different platforms, because if you're used to meeting in person, how do you go about doing that, I guess?
Okay, so Lee, I would say number one, I started off saying that, you know, a lot of remote work advice currently is like, you know, convert your 2-bedroom apartment into a cozy little work office space. But in Lee's case, she's got 4 people. So you convert the bedroom. You can convert your bedroom space or your bed into a day bed, and you can have your pillows, fluff them up, make it look cute. And that is your work area. But then I also go back to what I was saying in the presentation, where if you create a schedule, not only for yourself, but a schedule that you can actually share with the other 3 people in your home to say that, listen, this is my schedule for the day, or even my schedule for the week. Please keep in mind what is happening at these times. I think that makes it easier for people to know that, okay, at 8 a.m. Lee has a meeting, at 10 she has another Skype meeting. So I think those are some of the challenges that you can actually communicate with your team, not with your team, but with the people who live with you, to say that, look, I need quiet time at this particular time. And it always goes back to communication. I mean, that is basically the cornerstone of remote work and working from home. Is if you don't communicate with everybody around you what is happening and why you need silence, they're not going to guess on your behalf. And quite frankly, you know, most people won't even care until you present it to them and say, listen, I need quiet time at 10 a.m. and I really need you to do this for me. And that is much easier. And I think you manage that a little bit better when you do that.
I hope we answered the question. The second question is from Iris, and I guess she's talking about working from home with bad internet.
Yeah, so this is another one. This goes now to research, and it also is dependent on your funds as well. So I don't know if the bad connection, I mean, when I talk about our experience working in Africa, it's so completely different from anybody else. This is an example, because now unfortunately, you're going to have to do the work and the research of finding out which connection or which service provider actually works better for you. And it's something that there's no workaround until you figure that out. So whether it's MTN or Zamtel or Airtel or Hi, and can you afford to do that? But here's my advice to you, Iris. If you see that the only option for you or the best service provider is the most expensive one, that is where you need to hike up your fee. If you charge clients a certain amount, then you have to hike it up so that it covers that amount for you to have great connectivity or a better service provider. I think that's something that we are a little bit fearful in Zambia, especially when we're working remotely. But that is something you can negotiate right at the front to say, listen, these are my expenses, and you break it down. These are my expenses, and this is how much I'm charging you for the actual work. Expenses should always be covered no matter what. And you really need to look at it like, okay, if I need to have Wi-Fi in my home and I need to have that in my home to actually complete the work, then that's what you need to do. And then that's how you then pass on the cost to the client, because that's the only way you're going to get the work done. So it's so important for you to make sure that you actually negotiate with clients about that at the beginning, to say, look, the expenses part, there's no negotiation. This is how much it's going to cost you just to cover expenses, and then this is how much it's going to cost you to actually hire me to do the work. So there's that. If you are an employee, you can also negotiate either prior to getting a job. You can ask people, what is the data, or what is the data allowance? Is there data allowance? Can I have a data allowance? And you can explain to people why you need that, because it's something that if you don't have it, then you're not able to do the work. So I think most employers would bulk at it, but if they see that, again, it goes back to, if you show people what happens when you can work from home and you're working consistently, then they're much happier to provide you with certain things.
Okay. The next one is from Cherry. Her comment is that she's a full-time personal trainer and yoga teacher. And I thought maybe you could expand a little more on what options are there for people that have a role such as this. What tools can they use in the digital space so that they can still work from home in the times of coronavirus?
Okay, so with I think with personal trainers and yoga teachers, social media platforms are, especially the ones that have video capabilities, will really work well for you. But also, as you can see, we're on Google Hangout. You can actually have sessions with your clients and create workouts for your clients as well. On Instagram, you can actually create, for those clients who have paid in the past, you can separate them into clients who are interested but have not paid. You can create short videos for them on your timeline, which they can either watch from home, and they're little short workout videos. But then for your actual clients who have paid for your either subscription service or for workouts, at home workout or training schedules, you can actually create a close friends list. This is on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, you can create a close friends list and create specific and private content for them. There's also YouTube as well. YouTube is a wonderful option where you can create videos and stuff. But then again, if you don't have a phone that can create really great videos, there's other ways in which you can communicate. There's WhatsApp. You can always do WhatsApp video call and do sessions that way if people are willing and they're happy to do it. So I think during this time, you really have to pivot and look at the way you work from home differently, and make sure that you can still deliver to your clients. So I hope I've helped you there, Cherry.
All right. The next question is from Likumbi. Well, it's two parts. So the first part, she asked, how does one manage deliverables versus time, especially when working across teams? And the second question was, what virtual tools do you advise that people could use for group brainstorming or ideation sessions?
Okay, so managing deliverables versus time, I think, Likumbi, you would have to explain that one a little bit more to me. When you say versus time, what does she mean exactly? I know managing deliverables in any case, when you're working on your own, is a little bit easier because you sit down with the client and you ask the client when they would like certain things submitted, whether it's a project or a campaign. You can have that conversation, and then the time frame, and maybe that's what she's talking about, the time frame that you complete those deliverables, you have to negotiate with either your client or your employer and be honest with how long something will take to be done. Again, we go back to, this is a really different time for us, because they're now maybe they're campaigns or projects that would have taken a week. Last month it would have taken us a week, but then now we have to review, and it goes back to that whole, you have to restructure and adapt and really look at, okay, this particular deliverable, how has it been impacted by currently, if we look at COVID-19, how is it going to be impacted, and can we actually do this? Can I actually deliver this in the time that is requested, or do I need more time, or do I need less time? I think that's the that's a conversation that everybody needs to have. And especially when you're working across teams and you're relying on different people, you have to, it goes back to the communication aspects. What are people capable of during this time? What challenges are they currently experiencing working from home? And then you look at those challenges and address them so that people can deliver their work on time, and that you can restructure the timeline if need be. And good virtual tools for group brainstorming and ideation. So, I mean, I know Bongo Hive loves Slack, but not everybody is a fan of Slack. So you can, especially when, and this goes back to the issues that we may have, especially if you have any load shedding issues, WhatsApp groups are the most simple ways to do things for me. If there's any other tools, there are always other tools coming up, and this also goes back to my other conversation where I said you always have to do the research. What works best for everybody? I wouldn't subscribe one particular thing. I always subscribe the thing that is easiest for everybody else, because you also have to consider that you go back to that thing about assuming that everybody will be happy to work on Slack or able to work on Slack. But WhatsApp is, you all know, most people on WhatsApp, and it's the easiest one to do. So make it as easy as possible for people. I think that's my advice to you, Lukumbi. Make sure that whatever brainstorming tools you are using, make sure that it's the one that is easiest for people to use. You don't want to pick something that now somebody will say, "Ish, I can't use that one because either it is chowing too much data, or I'm having difficulties logging in," especially during this time. Hello? Are we still
Hi.
there? Hi.
We were having a conversation following that, and I think Kathy was explaining that her backup plans for data were sort of also failing her. So router not working, mobile hotspot running out of data, and trying to get another router only for that to go down. And there was a suggestion from Lee that she said she'd adjusted her work so that she can give her clients work in the evening, because then the network is a little better.
Yes,
So,
and that's what it goes back to, because remember, I'm glad that Lee came in and Kathy came in, and that's what I'm talking about. Now, imagine Kathy and Lee are on the same team, and we're still expecting deliverables to be the same and the timeline to be the same. You have to take into consideration that no matter what happened, Kathy just is not going to be online at the time that you expect her to be online. You may assume she can, but she can't, and so she's going to have backup plans. And if she then finds out that, look, evenings are better for her, then that's what has to happen. For me, that's what has happened. A lot of my clients now, I understand that I can have morning meetings, but I can only spare an hour in the morning, and then in the evening is where I do the bulk of my work. So I think that's where you have to, again, it goes back to adapting to the current situation and what is happening in your area or with your internet. It's that getting into that remote work frame of mind.
okay. And then he asked which platform. He says, why do you prefer Zoom over other communication platforms like Skype or Hangouts?
For me, I prefer Zoom because it's much easier, and I think to me it's much easier. I won't say that Google isn't easy. I mean, most people have Google Hangouts. I do know that, but I think for certain clients, especially when I need to share my screen and things like that, I do prefer Zoom. I do not know why I don't like Skype anymore. It is a personal preference, but there's no one is better than the other in any case, but it's just my personal preference. I've used all three, but I just like Zoom, the way Zoom works better for me. For the most part, Hangouts, you can still record, you can still show your screen. Same thing with Zoom, but I just prefer Zoom currently. And then it also goes back to that. That's my preference, but I'm not going to have an issue if someone said to me, let's have a conversation on Hangouts. Yeah.
Okay. What's the next conversation? There's a conversation about using Zoom, and Kathy was asking if we could list all these tools, and I said that we would add them to your presentation, so that if people would like to try out all these different tools that you're mentioning, they could
Yes.
get to it. And then, but there's a question on using IGTV videos. I think this is based off of the answer that you gave to Cherry. Whether using IGTV videos for Instagram is a good way to raise brand awareness, especially if there's difficulties with live streaming videos.
Okay, so then this also goes back to, do you feel that if you're able to live stream, fantastic. If you're not able to live stream, then pre-record and then upload it to IGTV later. On IGTV, I think for a lot of people that can live stream, it's great and you can put it up there. But I also prefer just especially in the Zambian context, to actually create the videos offline and then upload them when you can. And yes, it is a good way to raise brand awareness, because I think during this time, a lot of people want to see the faces behind the brands, or there's got to be a human aspect to your conversation online. Just putting up, I guess, tweets or anything like that, or just artwork right now, I don't think it's connecting with people as much. I think IGTV videos, especially if you have team videos, if you can see there's something new challenge where everybody does the dance, and then I'm pretty sure most people have seen it. Maretta, you've seen it, right? That is something where people are using it to cut, it's fun. It's something, it's a human side to things right now where a lot of things are really heavy. So yes, IGTV is a great way to raise brand awareness, and it also is a great way to connect with people. I think video has a much I think when you look at content, video, because you can see faces, you can see reactions and things like that. I think it's just a lot more fun, and you can connect better. Oh, and I just saw that they said, yeah, you can pre-record, so rather than the connectivity issues. So yeah, in terms of this particular presentation, you won't get, so I just need to clarify, this is not the presentation you will get. So I will actually email through what I call my Fixer Black Book. And in there, it kind of even breaks down how you, well, gives you a bit of tips, and it also has templates, it has planners, it also has budgeting tips as well, and also how you negotiate time with your clients. So it's a little bit more compact than today's. We only had an hour, so I had to pick what was the most relevant and then the most important. But everybody who joined, I guess, or signed up, I will email that to you.
All right. So we have 3 minutes left in this webinar. If there's anything specific you'd like Mukuka to unpack for you in regards to remote working, or digital tools that you can use to help you through this remote working period, please feel free to ask. We'll give you a minute or two to do that. But thank you to everyone who's engaging, especially in the chat, giving each other suggestions. That's also been really great.
Yeah. And I think that's another aspect of working remotely now. If you can find your, especially for those people who have been used to working in an office, they will discover that they will have more time now to actually go online and have conversations and find community or people who actually are in the same situation as them and will give you solutions and ideas. I think that's another way that you can always look at different ways of working remotely, reach out to people, ask people online, join other communities that are in your field or have similar situations to you. I know, for example, the travel industry, it has been hit quite hard during this time, but a lot of travel bloggers, travel companies, they're coming together and talking to each other about how are they coping, what are they doing differently, what does remote work, or what will it look like after COVID-19 goes. So it's now a really good time to actually do your research and talk to people.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much to everybody who joined us today. We've had a lot to learn from Mukuka's presentation from the webinar. And if you'd still like to reach out to her on other issues, her details are in the slide currently showing. Or you can reach out to Global Hive and we can get in touch with her for you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That was a great session. Thank you, Mukuka.
Thank you, everybody, and chat soon, I guess.
So we will be sending Mukuka's presentation when she makes it available, and also we will upload this webinar on our website and our YouTube page tomorrow morning.
Is that George who's asking a question? Oh, okay. It's just George sharing the links in the chat. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.